So I'm going to start by trying to answer questions online. Mary asks, is there a special meaning to the word Tripura? So, do you have a special association with Tripura? Would that be typically Advaitic? Now, the only association, I'm going to defer to our Hindu friends here for the meaning of the word Tripura. My only association is about a text called the Tripura Rasya. So Tripura, three what? Three Puranas. Puranas meaning?
Amazon River.
What?
Three states of consciousness. Three states of consciousness. According to the book. It's Trinity.
20? Trinity, yeah. Trinity. Three. So three is Trinity, it's three. And Puranas? Is that something to do, does it have something to do with these statues where you have three heads, looking in three directions? No. Okay.
It is that, because when you look at Tripura Rahasya, the book itself, you see Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh,
Shiva.
Statue.
Yeah.
So three dimension of the same.
Yeah, so that's basically, so Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the creation, the maintenance, or sustenance, and the annihilation. Those are three dimensions.
Sorry, Trimurti is the three, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva.
Trimurti, yes, three images, three pictures, three representations, right? Three forms. Okay, I guess. Thanks to our learned friends here, we finally solved the mystery. Mary, today I was thinking about something and maybe getting a little bogged down in the details. Suddenly I found myself saying, oh, stop being a person. As if it were, as if I were caught myself red-handed and noticed it too, which is a very valuable moment. Is this a case of a concept becoming an experience? Oh yes, that's when you catch yourself red-handed in being in ignorance at that moment, you are no longer in ignorance, in fact, because you are questioning being a person, being a separate consciousness. So the moment you are questioning to be a separate consciousness, you cease knowing or believing that you are a separate consciousness. You can be at the same time questioning and believing. So if you are questioning it, you are not believing it, and at that moment, you stop being in ignorance. Mary. oh, I'm going to forward that to John so that you can send her she has a problem apparently. So I sent something to John 92008. John M, yes. So if you can send her the credentials. And another one here, apparently. We didn't get it. Okay. Luciana, you said that knowingly living the cosmic dream doesn't entail feeling unconditional love for everyone. That we must discriminate between consciousness and her manifestations. I know that, and that's why I made a distinction between the perceptions and the perceived, and said that the unconditionality of this love lies in the relationship between the perceiver and the perceived. So while there may be evil in some characters of her plays, there is only innocence, intelligence, love, beauty, and humor in God, the perceiver and the perceived. Yes. Did you see the movie Dead Man Walking? No. Doesn't the understanding that no human being is beyond redemption show that even the darkest corner in the cosmic dream can be potentiality for love? And if so, couldn't such corners also be perfect pointers? Yeah, every moment is a potentiality for love. And love can show up in the most unlikely places. So we agree on that. And also, what seems to me to be very important, the moment is to understand that whatever is done by God and God alone. Therefore, we don't see bad people. There are no bad people. There are only God choosing to play deep ignorance, using some human bodies as puppets to play the game, but God remains the puppet master. So to see the puppets as bad puppets or good puppets is a mistaken view that fails to take into consideration the puppet master. Is simply to believe that the puppet show is real. So when we understand that, we don't see bad people any longer. We can see deeds coming from ignorance, that we can see. So it doesn't mean that we are seeing everything pink. It's just that we don't see separate individuals any longer. So, going back to the story of redemption, what makes me a little hesitant is this notion that there is redemption for whom? For a person. You see that this notion of redemption is also tainted by ignorance. It is a story that someone who was bad and becomes good. Diane says, Tripura password is not working with the link for the webcast.
Looking for everybody else. Some people needed to capitalize it for some reason. Maybe they have the caps lock on. You know. It works, believe me.
I believe you.
I'm forwarding that to you, you can answer. Sarah already. Kelly, I didn't receive a link or password, so okay. Forward to John. Carl says, 22 hours ago, and he says, triple point of water. Triple. So I guess it's Trinity Day today. Last night I learned, finally, of the triple point of water. The pressure and temperature in which water manifests in her three states, the frozen, liquid, and gaseous expression simultaneously. There was instantly some curiosity that this phenomenon is somehow an analogy to the unfolding of the understanding and points to the not knowing of what we are, pointing towards the borderless and liberating expression of our freedom. Does this resonate to you? Yes, it's a good metaphor. Metaphor, yes. Yes. For those who are not familiar with physics, there are some condition of pressure and temperature under which water simultaneously manifests in the three phases of ice, liquid, and vapor. Anything that works for you as a metaphor is good. Carl, serendipity feels like consciousness communicating directly into my local experience. It has manifested in various forms and circumstances, basically can manifest in anything and at any time. It always contains in the background of the experience the expression of love and often of intelligence, intimacy, and even humor, and always is inviting. This multifaceted experience confirms the path in a way no other could. My question is, isn't this serendipity that we experience a direct teaching with a capital T? I don't understand the question. Isn't the serendipity that we experience a direct teaching? I don't understand whether it means, isn't it serendipitous that we experience a direct teaching? In which case, yes, it is. These experiences in serendipity always leave me with a perfume of peace and don't surprise me anymore, because the other interpretation of the question is, isn't serendipity itself the experience of a direct teaching? Yes, it is. So it's yes to both questions. No matter which interpretation was correct. Tom, you said Kundalini energy is not needed in Advaita, so what is the spark or divine flame that gets kindled by the teacher? We have to understand the symbolism of the Kundalini yoga. The Kundalini energy is really the energy of desire, once the desire has reversed its direction away from the world of phenomena back to the source of all phenomena. In ignorance, the energy of desire goes towards the objects, the phenomena, the experiences, the phenomenal experiences, pizza, sex, and rock and roll, and beer. And at some point, there is a realization that more of those is not going to deliver the peace and the happiness we seek. That no object, no phenomenon can deliver the happiness and the peace we seek. Therefore, that which we truly seek is not a phenomenon. And since our experience is simply twofold, phenomena on one side, on the other side, the beholder of the phenomena, the consciousness. Beyond these four aspects, thoughts, bodily sensations, sense perceptions, one side, and consciousness, the other side, there is nothing else in our human experience, nothing else. Therefore, if that which we seek, the peace, the happiness, cannot be found in the phenomenal side, in the trinity of thoughts, bodily sensations, and sense perception, no matter how unlikely it seems to be at first sight, the only rational conclusion is that there is only one place where it can be found, which is in consciousness. At that moment, there is a 180-degree turn, a big U-turn, away from the objects, back to consciousness. So symbolically, in the yoga, the energy that comes from the source, from the top, if you will, goes down through nadis called Ida and Pingala that correspond to passivity and hyperactivity, if you will, And from there, gets lost in the desires and the fears, of course, about the world. When this U-turn takes place, symbolically, there is a reversal of this energy, so it is described as the energy of desire being channeled into the central channel of Sushumna, which could be called also the Advaita channel, and goes back to the source where it came from. It's redirected to the source. And that is called the awakening of Kundalini. So the real awakening of Kundalini is simply a glimpse of the true object of our desire, which is a glimpse of truth. That's the way it has to be understood. Not as some weird sensations in your spine. Because believe me, weird sensation in your spine as you get older, there are plenty of those. Okay. Any questions here? So here I have lost, by the way, this part of the congregation that believes in Kundalini Yoga and sensations in the spine. So after having lost the politically correct crowd last week, we just lost the Kundalini crowd.
Yesterday I asked a question and you said, that's impersonal desire. And I didn't accept that fully back then because I was thinking because I was so much thinking that desire was disturbing my peace. I was pretty sure about that. So your answer was very opposite. So, but more things was coming later. I mean, I saw you at dream, and I woke up for 5 a.m. or something. I woke up and that desire was very small desire. What can I ask to Francis? Like the little, when desire is degree is very small, it doesn't feel like real. It doesn't feel like real. But that desire was coming, and it doesn't feel like real. And then just your answer came. Francis said that desire is impersonal. So, okay, let's allow that. And then that's very really like hot energy was coming. Yeah, it was not really pleasant, but it was completely neutral, and I could see that completely impersonally. And it was like, it just looks like some planet, and then it's gone, and I was really, after that, after that overwhelming joy to last for a while, and then so I feel today I want to ask a question, same desire, but I can take every sensation as impersonally. So yeah, it's not really pleasant sensation, but it's so much freedom.
Yes, what we have to understand is this. When we ask a real question about the subject matter we are dealing with here, no matter from which angle we ask this question, if it is a real question, we are seeking the truth. And only the truth can seek the truth. Only the impersonal can seek the impersonal. So any questions that we have about the truth is impersonal. Actually, even if we talk about relative truth, even a question about relative truth is impersonal, because it comes from an open mind. A real question, in fact, is always impersonal. A real question, because a real question necessarily comes from an open mind. Because if the mind is closed, we don't have a question. We have a belief instead. We have an answer, a ready-made answer to the question. In order to have a question, we need not to know, right? We need not to know the answer. If we know the answer, or if we believe we know the answer, we don't have a question. Therefore, every true question, in fact, is impersonal. Now, not every true question seeks the liberation. But certainly, every true question about consciousness seeks liberation. So that being said, what happened to you is that finally you were open to the possibility that there are moments when you are impersonal. And not only were you open to this possibility, but you realize that, yes, there are things that I do, like asking questions about the truth, that are impersonal. There are many things we do that are impersonal. Even people who are in ignorance are able to love. They are able also to understand, and they seek also relative truth with open-mindedness. So they are able to do that. So people who are able to love, to seek beauty, to seek truth, even relative truth, they have these impersonal moments. Now, not everybody seeks absolute truth, seeks liberation. And certainly, any seeking of liberation is impersonal. Only the impersonal seeks the impersonal. That's important to recognize in us, because we stop judging ourselves, and we begin to recognize the impersonal at work in us, the impersonal pursuing the investigation in us. That's that's important. Because often people ask questions such as, well, since I am a person, everything I do is doomed, because I can never reach the truth, because as a person, I am always in ignorance. So the ignorance can never reach the truth any more than the shadow and the light cannot coexist at the same spot. Either there is a light or there is a shadow. That's true, but only if you forget that you are already the truth, and that that there are these moments in which the truth seeks the truth. It were true if we were always in ignorance, but that's not true. Ignorance is a temporary, intermittent condition. Now, it reoccurs tirelessly as long as we haven't had a glimpse of truth. Once we have had a glimpse of the absolute truth, then these reoccurrences gradually disappear. And my answer is a little too complicated, but you will discover that there are many occasions in which you are impersonal. Another example of being impersonal, actually, is whenever you try to conduct the experiment I am suggesting to conduct. Because they are not the same type of questions that you ask in satsang, but nevertheless, what an experiment is, for instance, an experiment conducted by a scientist, the scientist is asking nature a question. And the outcome of the experiment, the scientist doesn't know. The outcome of the experiment is the answer nature gives to the scientist. And similarly, in this case, these experiments that I suggest for you to conduct are questions that we ask from God. We ask God questions, and the outcome of this experiment is the answer. And because we are interested in the answer and we don't know the answer, these questions are true questions. They are about the absolute truth, God, whatever, and as such, they are impersonal. So every time you try to do that, every time you do the yoga, every time you meditate, every time you open a book about the truth, every time you watch a video, it comes from this impersonal reality which you are. So then you discover that there are many moments in your life when you are already impersonal.
Okay. Yeah. Not only seeking truth, but other.
What?
Not only thinking about truth, but when I. Yeah. I mean, when I desire something else, it could be also impersonal, even though it feels like.
Yes.
I don't need to quickly.
They can be, for instance, there are desires that are not about the truth, that can be desires for object, but that are also impersonal. For instance, if you desire for a friend to be healthy, or if you desire to buy a bottle of champagne to celebrate something with a friend, or even if you desire something for your body that your body needs, like food or shelter. These are impersonal desires because you are the manager of your body, you are not your body, and you are compassionate towards your body. Because you don't make any difference between really this and that. You are more responsible, of course, of your body, or of your mother, or of your children, or your children, because that's a situation life has placed you in, than you are from other people. So there are also different level of responsibilities in life due to the circumstances. But but your body is one of the things you are responsible for, and therefore there are very legitimate desires which are related to the needs of your body and to the needs as a human being. For instance, the desire for beauty is totally impersonal. The desire for music, the desire for the idea goes to you, I'm in this city, let's visit the museum. It's the desire for beauty, let's go to a concert. It's an impersonal desire, unless you are doing that to escape something. But if not, so there are many desires that seem to be personal because they are for objects that are in fact impersonal. There is a confusion here. Often people believe that desire for an object is egoistic or personal. Whereas that which makes a desire personal or impersonal is not the object of the desire, but it is for whom the desire. It is the origin, if you will, of the desire, rather than the object of the desire that makes it ignorant or impersonal.
Yeah, but sometimes it feels like mixed with the personal and impersonal. When I
Give me an example.
Okay. What else? Okay. I want to gain weight. Or I want to keep the weight. So I want to eat more. But I do dinner cleanup here. So I want to eat fast. So yeah. When I the dinner is ready thing, and it's like the race sign, like that kind of desire. I want to start early so I can save my time for dinner. I'm slow eater, kind of. I chew 100 times, not 100 times, but quite a lot. And then anyway, I want to go fast there. I want to eat faster because maybe I'm wrong, but I think eating more would make me good for my weight or so. But I think it's no problem. But
that is not. I don't see that is personal or ignorant.
I would be little easy, like the.
We may be mistaken, but there are many things we do because we think that it is good for the body. It turns out that perhaps that it was neutral or not that good, or that it was good. But that which matters is not whether it was good or not. That which matters is the intention. So if we do something out of benevolence and responsibility for the body, it's impersonal. We are the manager of the body. It's not different from doing something for our parents or for our children. It's the same. Our body is our child. There are so many misconceptions, about that. And it's inherited from all this junk about religion and that it's so ridiculous that, for instance, you shouldn't eat yourself. And you should give everything to others. But if you don't eat yourself and give everything to others, you're going to die. And then what are you going to give to others? It's not that you should treat others better than yourself. You should treat others exactly as yourself. I often tell this story with my teacher. At lunch, there was a very delicious apple tort, apple pie, French, nothing like what you have here in America. I'm sorry, but this thing with real French apples, first thing, then real butter and real, sorry about that for our vegan friends, and real dough, and a little bit of vanilla in it, and well, anyway, it was delicious. And then at dinner, there are only the two of us, and there is a sizable portion that remains. And I watch him as he cuts it, and he cuts it exactly in the middle, like just perfect, and that's the way it has to be.
Okay, I was going to ask the one more question, but I can ask next time or later.
Francis, so happiness doesn't come from inside, but I noticed that, for example, we have a bird feeder on the patio. These little birds come, and they eat, and they fly. And it makes me so happy inside. So Can it be that sometimes an object
Oh yes,
enlivens?
yes. Beautiful to see birds.
Oh, yeah.
My teacher, he loved birds. I think he was a bird himself. He looked like a bird. He loved birds. He had this theory also that bird sends messages. That if a bird was, knocking at the window, that I remember because he has this friend. We had this friend called Wei Wu Wei. He was a sage and wrote books. Didn't have students really, but wrote books. And one day we were in Switzerland, and a bird came, and this Wei Wu Wei gentleman, his bird was the oil, because Minerva, Athene is the goddess of wisdom in Greece, and her bird was the owl, the oiler. That was a German. Sorry. I know there was something fishy when I said it. So he immediately went on the phone and called him whether he was okay or whether he had bumped his head against the window. Yes. I have the same thing when I see a young puppy. A young puppy makes me so happy,
Hi, Francis. Last week you talked about the question some people ask about can one lose the truth, upon which you said the only difficulty or problem with that question is the little word one. And I kept thinking of it these last days, and I want to be sure whether I got that. So there is no one who is established in the truth.
Right.
Okay. So there is no one who can lose the truth.
Right.
So does that mean that consciousness chooses which body-minds through which it shines more or less transparency?
Yes. But it means that we choose, because we are consciousness. So there is no difference between consciousness chooses and we choose, which means that ignorance is not something which is imposed onto us, but it is something that we choose. So it's good news. You see, because the question, can we lose the fear behind this question once we have realized our true nature, can we lose it? Because, of course, if we ask this question at that moment, we can't have lost it, because it's based on an ignorant assumption. But the fact is that ignorance is not imposed onto us. So the fear of losing it, the question assumes that this loss is not voluntary. You see that we lose it in the same way I've lost my watch, or I've lost my keys. I didn't mean on purpose to lose them, you see. I just lost them, it happened to me. So I lose my enlightened status because this enlightened status is taken from me. That cannot happen, you see. In that sense, that cannot happen because the implicit assumption behind this question doesn't happen. Because whenever we go into ignorance, it is always because we choose it. Always. Just as it is as we choose it, just as we choose the color of the pant or of the shirt we put on that morning.
So does that mean that the only confusion we can have is that we confuse our body-mind, our personality, with consciousness? Is that right?
That, but it is not really that which triggers fear and agitation in us. It's rather the belief that this consciousness is mortal and dependent upon the body.
Okay, yeah.
So,
which is a confusion too.
Ignorance is really the belief that consciousness is limited.
Yeah. Okay.
More than the belief that I am the body. Of course, a first step, if we want to separate the path to liberation in steps, the first step is to understand that I'm consciousness rather than the body. But that's an easy one. The second step has to do with consciousness being then independent from the body and from anything else. So that's the important jump there. And at least being open to that. We don't need to give a positive answer to this question. All we need to do is to question the belief according to which it is consciousness is dependent upon the body and limited. Once we are in not knowing about this question, we are no longer in ignorance. That's also something very important to understand, you see, because we don't need to go to lose ignorance. We don't need to go into a special state. That's a misunderstanding. We simply need to liberate ourselves from the belief without necessarily replacing it with the opposite belief.
Okay.
And so we have to know that when we are in this state where I don't know whether consciousness is separate, limited or not, that then we are not in ignorance, just as it was very important for him to know that when he asks a question about the truth, this question never comes from ignorance. It is always impersonal. So it is important to understand, like in his case, in hindsight, that it was impersonal. But it is even more important to understand, not in hindsight, but in real time, when we are not in ignorance. In other words, when we are impersonal in real time, no longer in hindsight. And we are impersonal the moment we don't choose an answer to the question, is consciousness universal or not? It suffices to be not knowing about the answer. That's sufficient. So all we have to do is to go back to this not knowing, which is much easier, much more attainable than some kind of samadhi that can wait for lots of eons.
Thank you.
It's somewhat related to that. My question is regarding the spiritual inflation. You know, it appears
Is what?
spiritual inflation.
Spiritual inflation.
I don't know what spiritual inflation means.
Like, it appears that some people, even after awakening, like, they don't necessarily have like saintly disposition. You know, they do weird things. You know, like Rasputin, for example. You know,
Rasputin?
yeah. So I was wondering, how's that? You know, apparently he had this, you know, expansion, and yet.
Well, that this question requires some sorting out. For instance, okay, it has to do with the behavior, what impersonal behavior looks like, right? So, impersonal behavior can look very normal, but so can ignorant behavior too. And depending on the context, the ignorant behavior and the impersonal behavior can lead to the same decision and the same activity or action, because the context is not necessarily exactly the same in both cases. So that's the first thing. Normally, impersonal behavior will most of the time be ethical according to the usual social norms. However, there will be exceptions. There will be situations in which enlightened behavior is not going to look like normal behavior for society. That may be for different reasons. It may be that if you take an avadut in India, right, someone in some forest, assuming that there are still avaduts there, and you put him on a plane or Air India, right, and you transfer him to Washington, D.C., you know, just in front of the Capitol. And just you liberate the guy there. He's still enlightened, right? He will be quickly get arrested. But why? Because although his behavior is enlightened, it's not going to abide by the usual norms. So, on the other hand, there is another option that needs to be considered, that not every guru who claims to be enlightened is enlightened. So, but we cannot judge out of context. We can see if some behavior is ignorant, it touches us somewhere and we say, wait, that's weird. On the other hand, some people may be honestly mistaken also. So we have to look rather at the intention rather than at the deed itself. We have to see where does it come from. For instance, regarding political opinions, people may be at odds, seem to have different political opinions, because what political opinions are options, solutions to a given problem, right? And if you look at the point of view of each, you can see that depending on their experience and their knowledge, they will bring different solutions to the problem, but they both come from a place of love and intelligence. They do their best. Their conclusions differ because their experiences are different. And other people may be apparently in agreement on what to do, and one may come from a very ignorant position, very personal, seeing only their own personal interest as a person, and the other be impersonal, and they come with the same solution, and they vote for the same candidate on the election. You see? So it is the intention that kind of characterizes a deed as personal or impersonal. It's not the nature of the deed. That's very important to understand. In facing societal problems, some people are more practical and they see mostly the human side of it. I mean, the human side, the feeling side of it, and others see more the practical side of it. Yeah. Or
was it just the experience freedom, but not through impersonal? Could it be that, like, the person survived with the freedom?
No, what I was referring to was in a situation in which two impersonal decision would be at odds in a given situation, because when we make a decision, how does an impersonal decision arise? It arises out of a contemplation of the situation in its totality. And the situation in its totality includes two things. One is the situation in the world, the problem in the world. But there is also another aspect to it, which is our past experience. You see, and our skills, our talent, the skills we have developed. And as a result of this contemplation of the situation in its totality, from an impersonal perspective, a solution is going to emerge. Now, even if the situation in the world is the same, and two well-meaning people look at the same situation, because the subjective part of their experience, skills, etc., is different, they may come with solutions that are both impersonal, but not the same. And that's why we have to be careful when we judge people. We cannot judge people according to what they decide or for whom they vote, but we have to judge people according to their intentions. In fact, we shouldn't judge people at all. But we can evaluate whether a decision is personal or impersonal only if we take into account the totality of the picture that they face, and including their own experience or lack thereof. People who are very simplistic, not well educated, often will have very simplistic solutions to problems. They are meaning well, but they don't take into account other aspects. Or people will react from a very from a feeling level, vantage point, they would say, let's say there is a hostage taking in a bank by bad guys, right? And they start executing hostages. And the SWAT team has a clear shot at the hostage takers. Someone who doesn't have much experience and is a very heart-like person would say, no, negotiate, don't kill. Someone who is more practical, let's say you put a general there, and the general is going to kill the guy before he kills other innocent people. You see what I mean? So, and they both will make an impersonal decision according to their knowledge and their experience. That's an example.
Thank you.
I have a question about understanding as it pertains to the relative plane. So if I'm consciousness and only consciousness understands, or only consciousness says, yes, that's true. If I say, yes, that's true about something at the relative level, does that mean, is that some sort of confirmation of being in and of itself? Or does that mean that it's almost like I've already said, I am consciousness? Sorry that this isn't very clear.
No, it isn't. But what we are talking about understanding, right?
Yeah.
And what understanding means, it means the appearance, the sudden appearance of truth. In other words, before understanding, it was not evident. During understanding, truth is self-evident. After the understanding, this self-evidence of the moment of understanding has put an imprint in the mind. So then God has left. God was present at the moment of understanding and has put the seal of truth in the mind. The next moment, that which remains is the seal of truth in the mind. But what we have to be open to is that even in the case of relative understanding, relative truth, it's always God who understands. In other words, God is the only intelligent being in the world. There is only one understander. There is only one knower, only one perceiver. It is very obvious to us that it is the same who perceives, who knows, and who understands. It's very obvious to us. We don't have one in us, unless we are deeply troubled, deeply psychotic. But it is I who perceives. It is I who knows. It is I who understands. It is I who experiences. It's the same I, right? Now, if we are open to the possibility that this I is universal, then it follows that understanding is a universal experience. It's not a personal experience, never.
So there's just one experience of understanding, and if there's if it's about phenomenon, then we would call that a relative truth.
Yeah.
And if it's about
understanding
ourself,
brings clarity to a question or to a problem, to something. It clarifies. If the question is about something phenomenal, then it will remain within the phenomenal area, the understanding, it will express itself phenomenally. But nevertheless, the source of it is always the noumenal, just as what we perceive is phenomenal, but that which perceives is noumenal. That which we understand, in this case, is phenomenal, but that which understands is not phenomenal. So there is no, on the contrary, it all fits nicely together.
and the source of all of the mind's knowledge is consciousness.
Yes, the source of the mind and of everything is consciousness,
Yeah.
yes.
Thank
The
you.
mind appears as thoughts, bodily sensations, sense perceptions. Whether we subscribe to the materialist model, according to which the mind is the product of the physical body, or whether we subscribe to the idealist model, according to which whatever there are only in our experience perceptions, which are mind, and we have never seen really a physical object. We are just kind of inferring an external world and physical objects. Both models have their pros and cons, and no experiment enables us to determine which of the models is correct. And in fact, what if both models are not correct? Because they are kind of mutually exclusive. What is the truth? Because we have to understand that models are mind stuff. So when we create models, we implicitly assume that reality can be adequately described by models. In other words, by something which is a mind product, and the mind, the human mind, being a very tiny part of the full enchilada, right? So it's very unlikely that the mind, the human mind, with all these limitations, could ever have an adequate model, which means an adequate representation of reality. You see, there is this illusion. So you could ask, why, Francis, you are using models all the time? That's true. All my metaphors, examples are models. The distinction is that I'm not attached to them. I use models only to liberate us from all models. You see. The goal is not to replace a model with a better model, although that may be interesting, yes, but ultimately to be free from all models.
Thank you.
Francis, we as consciousness always have a choice for ignorance or not. Is it correct that most of us mind bodies are not aware of that?
Well, take our belief in Santa Claus. A belief is something that at some point you choose to validate. When we were born, we didn't believe in Santa Claus, right? Then when we are 3 years old, we have this deep belief in Santa Claus. So something has happened at some point between age 0 and age 3, right? At some point, this belief has taken root in us, obviously, right? Now, at that moment, there was no evidence of Santa Claus because it doesn't exist, really. However, we have a good excuses because we were trusting our parents, but most importantly, they took us to Macy's and we had our picture taken with this guy in the red coat, right? And with a long beard. So at least we had a good reason to believe in Santa Claus. However, with limited consciousness is the Santa Claus who has never shown up at Macy's. So therefore, for which we have zero evidence. Therefore, we have never seen this Santa Claus, right? He has never spoken to us. Many people have told us that it exists, of course, but that's not evidence. So at some point we have chosen, we must have chosen to believe it out of our freedom. Why? Because there was no evidence whatsoever. There was no Macy's and no stinking old guy with dressed in red. So we must have believed in it, begin to believe in it, out of our freedom. Moreover, how it has happened in the past is not important. The fact that there is no evidence at every moment shows that we nevertheless choose to believe in it in the absence of evidence. In other words, it shows a kind of inflexibility with regard to beliefs we have adopted, and we keep living with these beliefs for the rest of our lives. There is this form of rigidity in us. What is wonderful with when people become really interested in the truth, if they are really deeply interested, how this rigidity melts away. I could see in my case, I had all these political persuasions, and with my teacher, I could see it, it melted away. All this attachment to principles, belief systems, and religions, or my religions was atheism and materialism and scientism and what is extraordinary is that we live in a culture where attachment to belief system is considered a virtue. It's extraordinary. In other words, stupidity, lack of flexibility, lack of intelligence, lack of adaptativity is considered a virtue. So we really live in a society of imbeciles. It's like we should have an opinion on everything, which is okay. provided you are not attached to it and we are ready to change it the next day. You see? I mean, now I've just lost all the Democrats and all the Republicans.
Crowd's getting thin. Francis, regarding your previous comments about the impersonal nature of the truth, which I find very, very helpful. My question, and a little bit difficulty articulating it, is generally when we try to pay attention to something, our use of our attention, I mean, that's like, that's personalizing, you know, my attention. During the yoga, for example, a couple times I've heard you, you know, notice a sensation, for example, then you use the word knowingly. Now, when I hear that word knowingly, I immediately think about my personal attention that I seem to have control over in the moment. But really, there's a knowingly beyond that attention, is there not? That's not in my personal awareness at the time. Or am I missing that?
In this case, the use of the word knowingly, in fact, always refers to awareness. It is really a reminder that we know awareness. And it's a way. Knowingly is a word that stands almost for knowing the knower. Knowing the knower. You know? When my teacher had a glimpse, an important glimpse, and he was in India. So he was already visiting with his teacher, Panditji, who was... And so he had an appointment with him, and he entered the room, and Panditji was teaching. He had some students in the room, and he was a Sanskrit teacher, and then the students left, and immediately as the last student has left, there were only 2 or 3 students. He asked point blank my teacher, you know the body, you know the senses, you know the mind, right? And my teacher said, yes. And then he said, do you know the knower of the mind? You see? Do you know the knower? So knowingly refers to the knower.
Thank you.
In the yoga, feeling the borderlessness of sensations has been sort of okay for me. It's been sort of natural, but I know
it's not the borderlessness of sensations. It's the borderlessness of your experience. It's the borderlessness of the space in which the sensations appear.
Uh-oh. Oh, God. Oh, no. Well, in any case, there's something sort of intuitive about that. But today I noticed when I tried to add sound, it feels like it's oil and water. It feels like sensations and sounds are, I know in my mind that there's one receiver. It's like a funnel. Everything has to come to awareness or to consciousness. But it's thought. It's not, I don't get it somehow. It's like sounds just they're just different, darn it.
But two sensations are different. One in the shoulder or one in the foot. They're also different.
But they don't seem as different.
And yes, and two sounds are different. I'm not saying that all the sensations, all the perceptions are the same. On the contrary, they are all different. I'm not saying that they cannot be put in broad categories such as sounds, burning sensations, stabbing perceptions, itching sensations, right?
Right.
Of course, they can be put in those categories. But that doesn't, I don't see how it relates to what I'm saying.
I think it's what you said the other day, the separation between the sensations is body. And when I hear the kitchen, and it's always the kitchen, the pot, whatever. I don't know that I seem to be stuck with the
I talk about
feet.
the space between, the interval between a sensation in the shoulder and a sense. If you ask yourself, I'm talking about something very simple, not intellectual, right? Not something very. We are talking about direct experience here.
Yeah.
And if you are simply asked the question, what is there between my left shoulder and my right hip? And the answer is my torso. Right?
Yeah.
In other words, my body.
Yes.
And if you ask, what is there between my left shoulder and the sound in the kitchen? And the answer will be 40 feet of space in which there are people, there is a wall, and other things, right?
Yes.
But space.
Yes.
Right? So in one case, it's called body. In the other case, it's called space as an experience. Right?
Right.
But it is the two names are different, not because the experience of what is between is different. Because what is between is exactly the same. What is between is consciousness. So experientially, what is between two bodily sensations, or what is between two sounds, or what is between a sound and a bodily sensation, experientially is the same thing. It's called consciousness.
I think maybe I'm just busy labeling the sound.
I grant you, yeah, but
identify.
But sound is different. Sensation in the shoulder is different. Sensation in the hip is different. I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's not in question. The question is what is between, experientially, and what is our interpretation of our experience? That's the point. Our interpretation of our ordinary interpretation of our experience is that what is between the shoulder and the hip is one thing, my body. And what is between the shoulder and the sound is something else, space. One is me, my body. The other, the space, is not me.
Yes.
But these are interpretation of what is between. Because if I look at what is between, not conceptually, but experientially, it is the same. It's consciousness. Experientially. Between those appearances. So now if it is the same, why give two different names? Why see them as different? And then why do I call this my body and that space? If I am true to my experience, which tells me it is the same consciousness which is present in these two intervals, then I should either call what I call my body space, so there is space between this and there is space between this and that, or if I call that which is between this and that body, my body, I should also call that which is between this and that, my body, because experientially, it's the same experience. So that's all I was making. Don't worry if that doesn't convince you. I've done my best, then just throw it in the trash can, it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Hey, Francis. You've mentioned a couple of times that the ideal time for self-inquiry is not when you're miserable.
Yes.
Why would you ruin a perfectly good time with self-inquiry?
Because, then don't do it. The perfect time to do self-inquiry is when you enjoy doing it. In other words, when you are interested. When we are interested in something, it means we are enthusiastic about finding the answer. We are interested. And if there is interest, there is enjoyment, in fact.
Right.
Interest, love, enthusiasm, enjoyment are together, in fact. They are closely related. So the investigation is potent when there is this interest. It is this interest that leads to a fruitful investigation. Otherwise, it's only a mocked investigation, because the goal is not the truth. It's something else than the truth. If the goal of the investigation is to get rid of a feeling, for instance, the goal is not the truth. The goal is to get rid of a feeling. That's two different, totally different goals. So don't do the investigation for any other purpose than the interest in the truth. And don't do it. Don't waste your time. Don't do it, because then it will give your genuine interest in the truth the space to reveal itself, you see. Otherwise, we are constantly obfuscating the true, genuine interest for the truth, which in your case I'm sure is there, by all kinds of manipulations to trying to get rid of all these feelings in the body and all of that stuff. the interest for the truth is like a flame we have in us that once it's been lit up can never get extinguished. That's the interest for the truth. If this flame is left alone, it will create a huge fire, and all the problem will be consumed in this fire. But if we do anything which pretend to be interested in the truth, in other words, to be directed towards the flame, but which is not real interest for the truth, it's like using an extinguisher all around the flame, you know. It can never extinguish the flame, but it prevents the fire from catching up. So the best thing we have to do is to stop using the extinguisher. Then the fire will catch on its own.
Thank you.
Francis, I would like to follow up on your comment to Nam.
Let me add something. And so that you understand what is meant by interest in the truth, it is not like I want to know the truth, I want to have the samadhi. No. It's simply, I want to understand what Francis is saying. You see, that's simple. It's more, I want to understand what Francis is saying. That would be a better definition of interest in the truth. Otherwise, interest in the truth, yes, it's because I picture the samadhi of the truth as a big piece of cake. You see, that I don't know yet, but I assume it's going to be very, very excellent. And but that's not. No. It's simply interest in the truth. Whatever Francis or other weirdos like him are saying, I'd like to understand that. What means what? So that's interest for the truth. Yes, sorry.
I just want to follow up on the comment you made on Nam. Not all true question can liberate. I would like to understand that. What do you mean?
Did I say that?
Not all true questions can liberate.
Oh, yes. There can be true questions like what is the proof of the Pythagorean theorem? So that can be a true question if I am interested in mathematics.
Okay.
You see? But it's not, the answer to it is not going to liberate me. That's what I meant, yes.
Thanks. I also want to, I've been exploring this for some time. Is there a relation between sound and object, meaning any object creation and dissolution looks like there is a sound, or in India they call shabda, that plays an important role in understanding of that object that appears and disappears.
when the mind is quiet, there is this sound in the background which is called nada, right? But what you call shabda or shabd is different, right?
That's what I was just trying to get your input. I was thinking that Shabda is also the nada, yeah.
So yeah, then this internal sound is more. Of course, it's part of the mind, but it appears when the mind is quiet. There is nothing very special to it. For me, it's almost physiological. I remember that there was a period in my life when I was often doing this yoga exercise of standing on the head, Shirshasana. And after having been like 5 or 10 minutes in this position, going down, then this sound would be like blatant for sometimes. So I guess it has to do with circulation in the brain or something like that. Experientially, of course, it happens. We can perceive it only when there is a relative stillness in the mind. Otherwise, the mind agitation, which is in front, catches our attention and we don't feel it. So it appears as a symptom of a quiet mind, but it is not the cause of the quiet mind. The quiet mind, a really quiet mind, is the result of the glimpse. It's not, and a method in which we focus on the inner sound is still part of the progressive path. It's what happens when you stop focusing on it, it's like focusing on the breath. So there are, of course, in meditation it will tend to appear. If pranayama is properly performed, it will appear also, and some postures, of course, it will appear also. Strangely enough, I haven't noticed, because I don't do the posture on the head any longer, but I have an inversion table here. And I don't remember noticing it after having spent 5 minutes upside down on the table. So now, there is something else which is in the creation process of a thought, of a perception. sometimes in a meditative state, we can be kind of ahead of it. So we kind of see really the event arising out of the universal will, if you will. For instance, there have been many occasions when I was attending a satsang with my teacher. And before he would speak the words, I knew the words. I knew not the general meaning of, but exactly what a fraction of a second later will come out. It was like having a preview, access to, like when on TV they have this delay to censor the F word, you see, and put a bleep instead, so they have access like 1 second before, 2 seconds before what is being said. So I had this kind of access to the place from which the words were coming, and that was obviously evidence that they were not coming from the head of my teacher, that we were both tuning in to the same source. But it was not something that was going on all the time. It would have been boring to have this kind of echo all the time,
Yeah, the reason is, like as I said, when it happens, then you can see the transparency on that object that appears. It passes through that. Thank you, Francis.
We have a movie showing tonight, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It's for the rookies as well as for the aficionados of the movie.